Hello, I'm Stan Grant. Welcome to Garma in Gove in the Northern Territory. Here there is an extraordinary celebration underway of Indigenous culture and deep discussion about the issues facing Indigenous people in Australia today. A discussion about racism, a discussion about poverty, a discussion about the challenges that Indigenous people face every day of their lives. We've seen leaders from right across Australia coming here to be involved in these discussions, from the corporate world to political leaders to the leaders of the Indigenous community. And it happens at a time when Australia is going through a searing debate about racism and the treatment of a footballer, Adam Goodes.
Even in the most serious of debates, nothing cuts through quite like humour. One of Adam Goodes' fiercest critics in the firing line.
The minute we start asking people like Shane Warne to set our moral compass, we're in more trouble than we...
But not even humour can allay the anger felt here at Garma about the treatment of the footy legend.
If we look too far into the abyss of despair, we will see no hope. If we think after 200 plus years this is as far as we can take it, it will be the abyss that consumes us.
Someone described the racism in Australia was like an alcoholic who won't admit they've got a problem. And I think we've got to really think about that and say, well, we do have a problem.
Meanwhile, statehood is back on the agenda after COAG announced it would happen within 3 years. But Indigenous leaders are already raising their concerns.
Serious reservations that Aboriginal people continue to harbour, however extensive consultations with them about the implications of statehood might be, I say the timing's all wrong.
One of the driving forces behind the Garma festival you see here is the head of the Yothu Yindi Foundation, Mr Unapingu. He was a vocal critic in the 90s of statehood. He says quite simply that the process isolated his people and all Aboriginal Territorians out of the debate. All of these years on, the land rights champion is being acknowledged for his lifetime of work with an honorary doctorate of laws.
What an extraordinary year it has been for the Northern Territory Chief Minister Adam Giles, at one point only moments away from losing his job as his own party turned on him. Well, now, of course, he's overseeing the Northern Territory's move towards potential statehood, all that's involved in that. A discussion about the rights of Indigenous people, what statehood would mean for Indigenous people. And of course, his thoughts on the issue of the moment, the question of racism in Australia. Put all these questions to Adam Giles as we sat down for this interview. Chief Minister, thanks so much for joining us. We're here at Garma. Give us your thoughts, first of all, about what you look for in a meeting such as this. What do you hope comes out of it?
Well, it's really important to see a sharing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, and I think the opportunity for local people to be empowered to be able to run a festival of this nature, but also to be able to share their culture and learn from other people far and wide, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
How do you move beyond it being a talk fest, though? There are so many crippling issues that face communities. We can come together here and we can have these discussions, but where does it go to once people leave?
Well, I think people have also got to stop talking about issues and start talking about opportunities and start celebrating successes. As Australians, we're very well known as the tall poppy nation. We're quick to cut our tall poppies down. We're also keen to focus on the problems, but there is so much success in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and individuals around the nation. I think we should be also looking at that, but in terms of the festival itself, a lot of culture, a lot of history, but also a lot of sharing and learnings about the way forward.
Now, you mentioned the tall poppy. Let's get to the issue that is on everyone's mind, everyone's lips at the moment, and that is the Adam Goodes situation. In your mind, very directly, is this racism?
In my mind, I'm concerned for the mental health of Adam Goodes. Too often we forget about the mental health and the emotional well-being of individuals. Mental health is an issue that affects many Australians, and the situation that Adam Goodes is going through, from my point of view, forgetting about the issue itself, they can have concern about his mental health. Yesterday I was at a fundraiser raising money for Beyond Blue, and seeing how we can get money into a worthwhile cause to support people who face hardships from an emotional point of view themselves, and at the same time of raising money for Beyond Blue, the Adam Goodes commentary is going on, and my thoughts and concerns are more around the mental health issue of Adam Goodes.
Adam's been a big campaigner for constitutional recognition. It's on the agenda here. It's going to be one of the focal points of the discussions. Where are we at on that at the moment? The Prime Minister's had meetings with leaders. There's been various responses to that. There's frustration with the slowness of the process. We're nowhere near getting a question, and there are still divisions, and rightly so, within the Indigenous community before we even take it to the broader Australian population. What's your take on where we're at and where we need to be?
Well, I think we need to get the date set, and I think the anniversary in 2017 is a good time to have that referendum itself. Let's get that cemented away. Let's start getting up what a couple of the questions might be, short and succinct, so Australia can start to follow in that debate itself. And then I also think that we need a highly motivated educational campaign, because where I sit in the Northern Territory, yes, constitutional recognition is important. It's got to be inclusive and not divisive within the nation. But in the Northern Territory, there are people who are very interested in getting running water and appropriate accommodation and jobs rather than constitutional recognition. So from my point of view, it's a balance of constitutional recognition as symbolism that delivers real outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the nation, but also how we get practical results on the ground as well.
Is it just symbolism? Where do you sit on the various models that are being put about? There is the question of direct recognition within the body of the Constitution, striking down racially discriminatory sections of the Constitution, perhaps even putting in an anti-discriminatory clause in the Constitution as well. There are others who want something symbolic sitting outside the Constitution. There is Noel Pearson who wants a recognition outside the Constitution, but a body within the Constitution enforced with the power to advise governments on policy.
Well, this is part of the problem in the debate. There's a lot of detail, a lot of questions, and there's no answers, and there's no leadership in terms of the constitutional agenda to take it forward. And until there's a more cohesive collective, I don't think people are going to get around the issue itself and start to take that forward.
What's your inclination though? Would you rather see something empowered within the body of the Constitution, or are you more in favour of something that sits symbolically outside of it and doesn't necessarily have any legal implications?
Look, I don't have a preference except for to say I want something that will join the nation together, not divide the nation, and that's what's really important.
You may be facing the same question here very directly. We heard from Patrick Dodson this morning talking about the argument for statehood in the Northern Territory and the potential implications and impact that has on Indigenous people. He says he would want to see Indigenous rights enshrined in any territory constitution if it was to become a state. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's the right time, it's the right question, it's the right statement. It is an opportunity to get that on the table, up the front, right now at the start of the conversation of statehood. We've discussed it for a long period of time in the Northern Territory, previously had a referendum. I don't think at that point in time that Aboriginal Territorians were appropriately consulted, supported, and have a leadership approach in that agenda. That will change this time as we slowly start to talk about the future direction of statehood and ensuring that if we have a Bill of Rights, when we have a constitution, what that means for enshrining Aboriginal Territorians within that constitution, along with everybody else, to make sure that we harness the history and the future of all of us together.
Central to this is the question of land rights and where that would sit under a territory state or a northern state, for want of a better, whatever it is called. Where that would sit, given that it now sits within the Commonwealth. What's your view on that, and what would you say to the concerns that people may have of an erosion of those land rights?
Well, the opportunity of statehood presents a lot more rights for all Territorians, including Aboriginal Territorians, with the ability to solidify language, law and culture in the makeup of the state going ahead. I don't think it's a question about land rights. I think it's an opportunity to get more rights for Territorians, to have more protections, so that issues such as the intervention and changing territory legislation can't happen into the future. So it will provide a more secure platform of rights in the Northern Territory, and the benefit of starting the dialogue and the conversation, the consultation, and having significant local Aboriginal leadership involved in that process will allow us to guide the direction of issues such as this. And it's not for me or others to put this up front. It's about a consultative approach to how we lead that going ahead.
You say it's not about land rights. People say yes, it is about land rights. They already have those rights solidified. They're enjoying the benefits of those rights.
But it's not about land rights in terms of statehood. And if we want to talk about Aboriginal people, it's about the conversation.
Would you rather that under the state
statehood.
control, or would you rather are that still seated in the Commonwealth?
Well, this is a matter for Aboriginal Territorians. It's not a matter for Adam Giles, the Chief Minister, and that's part of the process. I think we need to give that ownership back. It's about empowering communities and empowering individuals so that they can have a say about what they think is the best model. It's not government setting this agenda. Statehood is for Territorians, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal.
I want to turn to some of the issues that you've faced over the past year. It's been an extraordinary year. You were minutes away from losing your own job. It has been a tumultuous time with resignations and all sorts of allegations being thrown around. People looking on the outside, looking in, must scratch their head and wonder what is going on. Well,
this is the fantastic nature of democracies in which we live, and while there might be a focus on the Northern Territory from time to time, and doesn't always look pretty, but these situations occur in other jurisdictions on a regular basis as well. And what we know is that in the Northern Territory we have a healthy democracy. We are still growing and learning, and by 2018, the 1st of July, the desire to become a state will be at a point in time when we grow to a high level of maturity.
Finally though, there are some who are really concerned about what's going on here, concerned about the propriety of what's taking place, and are saying there needs to be much more broader investigations, potentially an independent commission against corruption investigation as well. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that these models are always good to be looked at, and we will continue to look at how we can strengthen our transparency laws. But what I do know is that any allegation that's ever been made has been investigated properly, and under our integrity panel of Public Interest and Information Disclosure Commissioner or Auditor General and Ombudsman, they have the tools to be able to conduct these investigations with support of both the Territory Police and, if they need to go outside of that, interstate or the Australian Federal Police. So there is those levels of integrity there now, but I also look at other ICACs, whether that's in Western Australia or New South Wales, and some of the challenges they face, and I've got to say that I have full support in the models that we have now, and any allegations that may come up we'll investigate fully, and there hasn't been an allegation that's made with evidence that hasn't been investigated.
Australians have a date with history. At some point in the future, they're going to be asked to recognise Indigenous people in the Constitution. Before then, there is a political process. There are negotiations, and a hope that the political leaders and the Indigenous people can bring the rest of Australia with them. I discussed this issue with a panel of people directly involved in trying to make history in Australia.
The frustration of Indigenous leadership is palpable.
This is about fixing up a 200-year-old problem where we've been the playthings of governments, the play tools of every policy that's been made, every way in which we're to be treated. We've been the play tools of whomever has been in power.
It came as news the Prime Minister had rejected a funding call for substantial Indigenous consultations, drawing anger and despair.
There's a clear lack of leadership in relation to this crucial question, but the absence of leadership should not mean that we drop our bundle. It is around about now that we needed clear leadership. It is round about now that we needed clear leadership on recognition, and we don't yet have it. But that should not mean that we despair. I think it means that we continue our insistence that we will have a process within Indigenous Australia.
It's hard not to feel some despair right now when two of our leaders, greatest leaders, put up a proposal and it's just shot down.
Causing even surprise from Labor Senator Nova PERIS that this could be a position of her leader.
If we don't have this convention for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, then I believe we are wasting our time, and it's important to have this, and that was one of our recommendations from the Joint Select Committee. It was unanimous that we support constitutional recognition. However, a prohibition against discrimination was overwhelmingly supported by all the hearings that we had, and a convention for Aboriginal people.
Outside the debate about consultation, the major questions will be around the type of change, substantive or symbolic, inside or outside the Constitution, the removal of provisions around race, or even a parliamentary advisory committee outside of Parliament, but ultimately a way of uniting the nation.
So recognition is a mirror. This is not just about recognising the blackfellas. Recognition is about recognising the whitefellas as much as recognising the blackfellas. You will recognise yourselves when you recognise the original peoples of this country, their languages, their culture, their heritage, and to own their treatment over the last 2 centuries.
You know, we've been depicted in the media for so long as, you know, the whinging, whining blacks. What more do they want now? We have quite a task ahead of us. So I'm glad that Noel and Patrick are on the case and working together on this, because we do need one clear question and we need to be able to explain it very clearly to Australians.
And it wasn't only Indigenous leaders calling for more clarity on constitutional reform. Fred Chaney is a former deputy leader of the Liberal Party and an Aboriginal Affairs Minister, a former board member of Reconciliation Australia. He told Stan Grant there's a leadership void when it comes to recognition.
Well, I think it was in the context of the constitutional debate, and it seems to me that it is up to government and indeed to the opposition to set some parameters or to set a course. As it is, I think we're left to the Aboriginal leadership to work the way forward. I strongly support the proposal they've put up, and I think it's mostly has to be supported because there's no real alternative within government and politics.
It's extraordinary when you look at the polling numbers that show an overwhelming majority of Australians are in favour of the concept of recognition. Given how our political leaders look to polls for approval, you would think they'd be on safe ground, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but I think political leadership across the board, I think, is extremely nervous, always looking to whether it's going to offend this group or that. And there'll be a vigorous group that would oppose constitutional recognition, and I think probably the leaders are pretty shy of that.
We know that referendum will not pass without bipartisanship, without that hefty political backing. Are you nervous about the future of constitutional recognition, given that we're not seeing the level of leadership buy-in that you would like to see at this stage?
But I don't think you can underestimate the importance of political leadership. A lot of people will follow the voices of the leader of the party they support, whether it's the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, the Greens or the National Party. So unless the leaders have got political capital to spend on this, unless they're prepared to back the words, as Tony Abbott said, he'd sweat blood on it. But I think you've got to be prepared to show that, to say that this is something really important for Australia, this is something I back, and I'm part of convincing you that this is good for the good of all of us.
Do you think that there's a reluctance because there doesn't appear to be consensus amongst the Indigenous population themselves right now?
Look, you're never going to get 100% support from the Australian people or the Indigenous people, but surely after all this time, after they've had a report from the expert committee since January 2012, they have a pretty clear idea of what they're prepared to back and what they're prepared to advocate. If you're just going to wait until the public gives you a direction, then I think that's the opposite of leadership.
Where do you sit on the substance of the question? Should there be recognition in the body of the Constitution that potentially has legal clout? Should that also come with the removal of racially discriminatory clauses? Should there be an insertion of a ban on racial discrimination? All of this is part of the discussion, but do you see this as a chance for something substantive, something with legal power, or is this symbolic?
Look, my personal judgment is that the very minimum that I want to see in a proposition that I can support is that it asserts the position that Aboriginal and Islander their place in Australia is not just a matter of history, it's a part of Australia at the present and it's part of Australia in the future. This is what the minimum that's needed to reassure, I suppose, Indigenous Australians that their continued existence as a cultural group in this country is accepted by all of us.
Is this lack of leadership that you've identified confined to the question of constitutional recognition, or if you look at other areas that affect Indigenous people, and we're seeing a vigorous debate about racism now given the treatment of Adam Goodes, is there also a lack of leadership to give form to that debate, to enter that debate, to be able to act as a soothing voice, a healing voice in Australia, something that potentially is so divisive?
Look, I think it is really important that political leadership comes together and gives that soothing voice. But can I say I think this is part of a much wider malaise. Probably the most unexpected union I've ever seen is a union between News Limited and Fairfax. They've come together with the Business Council, the trade union movement, other bodies to say, let's get a bit of direction into national policy. So I don't think this is purely a problem related to recognition of Indigenous Australians, the Constitution. I think it's a wider political malaise. What we're asking from our political leadership is, show us there's a moral core to your position, show us there's something you believe in, show us there's something you're prepared to fight for and something you're prepared to tell us is good for this country.
When we look, you've been around Indigenous affairs for such a long time. You were former Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. You've been acknowledged with the Order of Australia for your services to Indigenous people and Indigenous issues. Broadly, where do you see the Australian population on this question? Is there a reflexive inherent racism that exists in Australia? Is there a compassion deficit? Is there a lack of care when it comes to Indigenous issues?
But first of all, take the positives. During my lifetime, I've seen huge changes. We've gone from being a segregated country to being a country with full civil and political rights. And I've never seen so many people putting their hands out to help. There are hundreds and hundreds of reconciliation action plans. Here at Garma, we've got all of these people from great companies that are there entering into genuine partnerships with Aboriginal people to make things better. That's a fantastic plus. I think the problem, and the problem that was really brought out by the goods controversy, is that there is in the secret hearts of too many Australians a desire that Aboriginals simply forget being Aboriginals, Islanders forget being Islanders. Aren't you just one of us the same as everyone else? It's that dichotomy between full and equal citizenship and actually allowing room for difference. I think that one of the richest things about this country are the continuing Aboriginal and Islander cultures. We've been showing that in spades over the last few days, but I see it every week in different parts of Australia. We have to be big enough in our hearts, big enough in our pockets, big enough in every way to say continuing difference is okay for Australia.
Does that follow through to policy? One of the real criticisms that we're hearing from Indigenous people here at Garma is that their voices are not listened to. There is not enough consultation. Decisions are made from the top down, and clearly that has been shown to fail. This invisibility that you speak of, this desire for Indigenous people to forget about their heritage and their past and be Australians with everyone else, does that follow through to the lack of consultation when it comes to policy?
Look, oddly enough, successive governments and the public servants involved have diagnosed what works and what's needed. And everybody agrees that what works is when the people themselves are involved, when there's bottom-up involvement. If you look at the announcements of this government in the 2014 budget, they've advocated a way forward that is really good. The difficulty is in changing the old habits, in not being top-down, pushing solutions onto people and working with people from the ground up. Governments know that's what they need to do, they just find it terribly hard to do, and there are structural reasons in the bureaucracy and the way we set up our public service and departments that gets in the way of that. Until you get real reform of the structures of government, I think we're going to go on floundering.
Fred Chaney, good to talk to you.
Thanks.
In 2007, the headlines screamed of the abuse of children in communities in the Northern Territory. The then Howard government called an emergency and called in the army. It became known as the intervention. To so many people in Australia, this is history. But it's not history here, where the intervention is real and people's reaction to it is equally as real. Here's Dan Borshett.
Indigenous leaders say they felt like aliens on their own land when the federal government sent in the troops to implement the intervention.
Intervention brought nothing to our communities. Government just come in and took away our rights and left us with nothing.
Since the policy was introduced in 2007, Green Senator Rachel SIEWERT has called for it to be abolished.
I will never forget sitting there with those women, seeing the tears rolling down their faces about what was coming at them in terms of the intervention. And the things that they told me then about what it would mean are exactly what happened.
Indigenous people say there was no consultation about the policy that was defended by the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Secretary.
The nature of the emergency response meant that there wasn't the time to do the consultation which I think is needed to be done. I think we've learned some of the lessons from the past.
Begun by the Howard government and then changed and continued under the governments of Prime Minister Rudd and Gillard, many Indigenous people here at the Garma Festival say it forever shattered their faith in public policy and decisions made in Canberra.
This country has a problem with the truth of Aboriginal people. And every time we come out and tell our story, it's like, shut the book. We don't want to deal with it.
We all know the name Nova Peris, of course, an extraordinary athlete, an Olympian, a gold medal winner. She is also now a Labor senator for the Northern Territory, a passionate advocate for her Indigenous people, and someone who is concerned about the direction of Indigenous policy. She's frustrated, she says, that she can't see any cut through. What she wants to do is to remove Indigenous policy from politics. Here she speaks to Dan Borsha.
We've spoken throughout this Garma festival about the way that Indigenous people across the country have felt about different policies, which all fits into this broader debate. We have heard from ladies talking about how they felt like when the intervention was introduced, for example, that they felt like they were alienated on their country. The pain is still so raw from that social policy that was introduced more than 7 years ago.
Yeah. Absolutely, and like I said today, you know, I've said it many times, all Aboriginal people were painted with the one brushstroke. You know, we were all categorised as a race of people who couldn't get their act together, and the government had to come in and intervene, and look what it's done. It's done nothing for Aboriginal people except create a stereotype that we need or should be subjected to continuous government policies because we can't help ourselves. This forum here is about social enterprise. It's about Aboriginal people being empowered to say, let us sit in the driver's seat, let us take control of our lives, you know, and that's what we're calling for. And you know, when I look around at this place, it's such a beautiful place, and irrespective of what's thrown at Aboriginal people, you've got people like the Yolngu people that continue to open its country, opens its arms full of love and says, come to this country, learn about our culture, we want to share it with you. And we're still subjected, you know, to racist policies that continuous government impose on Aboriginal people. You know, you've got homeland schooling, bilingual education, you know,
which of course was stopped by both sides of government here in the Territory. Bilingual education has been a real battleground, as has the intervention, which was introduced by the Howard government, but then changed and continued on under two successive Labor Prime Ministers. Yeah. Both sides of politics have done damage in this space, you'd have to think.
And I said that today in my speech, Dan, and I said that, you know, there are, you know, when you look at the incarceration rates, the high suicide rates, you know, where we are as a nation, we talk about 3% of the Australian population being on the front page of every newspaper almost every single day. We've got to get it right. And there are continuous government policies that have done almost limited goodwill amongst Aboriginal people in terms of empowering them. So I do get very emotional and passionate, and I said that I put my hand up because I wanted to be part of a change. And you know, meanwhile, Labor has done some wonderful things, but at the same time, you know, we understand that we've got it wrong in the past, and until we acknowledge what has been done wrong in the past, we can never make a better future.
You've spoken about a different approach to policy for Indigenous affairs, akin to, I guess, a quarantining for a set period of time. Can you explain to me what you want and how exactly that would work and what the benefits would be?
Well, I think the benefits would be, like here in the Northern Territory, we have APONT, you know, Aboriginal Peak Organisations, NT. That's the peak organisation for almost everything to do with Aboriginal affairs here in the Northern Territory. They should be the one-stop shop when it comes to health, education, anything to do with social enterprise. You've got the land councils that are all part of it. They should be the one-stop go-to shop. Anything to do with Aboriginal people, all core funding should be able to go to that, and the money gets quarantined. For once in your life, wouldn't every non-Indigenous Australian like to see that Aboriginal people's future is in the hands of Aboriginal people? For me, as a politician now, so I'll put my political hat on, you know, I don't want to be part of the future if we continue to get things wrong. You know, you've got Aboriginal people who were so well... every day that's their passion, to make change, and they're continually fighting just for the basic human rights. Give the power to them, give the finances, the resources to them, because they know best. They walk the streets you know, every single day almost screaming out for help. When you're in Canberra, you've got the parliamentary wings just full of people who are coming in saying, we know best. Let's empower these people that do know best once and for all.
You've spoken very passionately about these topics for some time. Now it seems to me that you are at a frustration point about the political process. Do you see yourself continuing on as a politician while this continues?
Look, I believe you've got to be in the ring to fight. You know, you've got to be the one that's in there trying to make change and just, you know, yelling out from the highest mountain saying this is what we want. And, you know, I walked into Parliament as an Aboriginal person, and I want to walk out as an Aboriginal person who's made a difference from the inside out. And, you know, I think, you know, we've got some great people within the Labor Party who come to me and say, you know, this is fantastic that we've got like an inside-out approach now, and you know, everyone acknowledges we've got it wrong in the past, but you know, let's go forward. And it's like a lot of these prominent Yolngu people here says, don't leave us behind, take us with you, and let's talk about true partnership.
As a girl, Renee Wotton looked to the skies and dreamed of what she could achieve. Not a pilot. No, Renee wanted to know what drove the planes that took the pilots to the sky. Renee is on the cusp of becoming Australia's first Indigenous aeronautical engineer, and her ambitions are limitless.
Always had an interest in aviation from about the age of 12, and through my involvement in Air Force cadets when I was younger, that kind of saw me through to take on my studies in aviation, more specifically aerospace engineering. And you know, this is a passion of mine, and I've always been involved with it, so it's something that I want to see through and make it my career into the future.
What is it that you think about this field that drives you?
One of the things is the fact that it's so far away from what females have always been involved in. I love the fact that I've been challenged in so many ways by so many people about being an aerospace engineer and being involved in this field. So to succeed and not only challenge people's ideas and stereotypes, but also to follow my passion and do it as well as I can is a massive challenge and something that I want to succeed at. So.
You've been described to me as a young Tharawal woman who's breaking glass ceilings. What do you think of that?
It's pretty outstanding. I feel very proud, and my family obviously are very proud of me. So it's something that I don't think is specific to just an Indigenous person or a female. It's something that I want to show to other people, young people, that you know, you can do anything that you want as long as you work hard at it. So I'm doing my best at that, and hopefully being role models to other people around me.
Renee, give me a snapshot of what you'll be doing when you start working. You're soon to graduate. What sort of things will you be getting up to in this career path?
Well, so far I've had a few experiences through different departments at QANTAS, where I'm interning, and there I've been involved in fleet performance and development, which is looking at the in-flight technology and software engineering behind what computers and what programs we use in the cockpit of an aircraft, to optimising maintenance schedules for engineering and maintaining on time, and bringing our aircraft as safe as possible to the line for customers.
What sort of an insight has this internship offered you?
Insight?
Yeah.
It's been a massive personal and professional period of progression, I guess. I came to Sydney to begin my studies at 17 years old, and for me it was a massive step up and change to what I had ever grown up around. I was the first in my family to ever go to uni, so I grew significantly quick and learnt that there's so much that the world can offer, and that's another driver, I guess, as to why I want to keep going and keep exploring what else is out there.
If we look back to starting that training at the age of 17, you were in the Air Force cadets before that. What was the pathway like from 17 to now at 22, and how have you been supported along the way?
It's been very tricky, but when I first came to university, I met Career Trackers, a not-for-profit Indigenous organisation that links Indigenous university students with private corporate sector Australia. Through being involved in that program, I have been supported from the get-go. So it was in its early stages when I first joined, and as it's grown over the last 5 years, the support, the professional progression, and the staff members involved in each individual's experience through our university and also interning at a private sector company has allowed me to transition quite easily actually into the future, I guess.
So Career Trackers offers mentoring and support along the way?
Yes, correct. So each individual university student gets their own student advisor, and they meet with you on a monthly basis. And the Career Trackers program also offer a Leadership Development Institute, which is an annual event where we go and we meet with leaders in different areas of corporate Australia that come and teach us and provide workshops in different areas, so professional leadership, public speaking, and personal branding. There's a whole range of different things, and without that support and without that help, you would get lost very easily. I think coming from a small local school in regional Australia to the big corporate sector of Sydney. So through the mentoring, through the programs, through the workshops, Career Trackers have provided every single individual an opportunity to provide their own pathway in life.
And I guess that's something that we've seen discussed here at the Garma Festival, the risk of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people getting lost in that process from transitioning from sometimes small towns or homelands that we're talking about here as well, to getting into those career paths. Is that something that you think is a risk as well?
Yeah, completely. I think every time that we have an event, a workshop, every single year, whether it be every 6 months or every 3 months, I am always re-enlightened as to where I'm going in life and what support is available. And it's quite easily forgotten when you don't have that support around you, and you lose your way easily. And another thing is, where I came from, I had no family to back me up and to support me when I came to university. So to have Career Trackers there, that was like another family, I guess. So you know, you meet with other students, you grow with other students, and you start kind of realising, wow, there's so much more to life, and there's a lot of people there to help me along the way. So,
Renee, when we talk about family, what do they say when you talk to them about graduating as an aerospace engineer?
I don't think they believe it yet. Yeah, I guess it's until I have that piece of paper, it's something that I'm still trying to get to. So they're very proud of me, and they can't believe where I've gotten to, but there's still a lot to go. So.
And just finally, Renee, if you had a message to other young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, young Australians more generally, about following the dreams that we've been speaking about, what would that be?
It would be find people that you look up and want to be. Find people that inspire you and motivate you. If you have an inkling of a feeling that you can do better, you can strive for more, and that you deserve more, then you do. Everybody does. But you have to be self-motivated. You have to get out there and find your own opportunities. So you work hard and you can get anywhere.
Garma has been an extraordinary opportunity to ponder the enduring survival of Indigenous culture, but also to grapple with the almost intractable problems that Indigenous people face. We've heard from the community, we've heard from the people, we've heard from the political and corporate leaders. Many words have been spoken. Now the challenge is to turn those words into action. I'm Stan Grant. Thanks for watching.